Baby Island, Chapter 12, Several Surprises. "Well, I guess you reformed Halfred anyway," said Jean cheerfully. "Oh, Jeanie, what a pity," wailed Mary. "That's the end of Mr. Peterkin, I suppose. Why couldn't the babies have put off crying?" "There's nothing like a nice, clean baby to hold," mocked Jean, who was in a particularly impish mood after having had to sit still for so long listening to Mary's sermon. "That naughty Charlie started the whole trouble," cried Mary. "He ought to be punished." But Charlie was already on Jean's shoulder with his skinny arms around her neck, and he knew that he was safe. Whether they admitted it or not, they were both much disappointed at the outcome of the party. Mr. Peterkin had seemed so much reformed and had even been on the point of giving them more milk, perhaps even of cutting a path for them through the jungle. Now all was lost. They gradually quieted the howling babies and put them down for their naps. Mary lay down also, tired from her combined duties as cook, hostess, and saver of souls. Jean and Charlie went up to the vine swing in the edge of the woods, and Jean swung back and forth, back and forth. She made up one of her songs. "Oh, E were ayin' long ago, ayin' gay were E. E dropped a pitchfork on his toe, and then E went to sea. Oh, Mr. Peterkin, jolly Mr. Peterkin, dear old Mr. Peterkin, and then E went to sea. Oh, Mary preached a sermon fine, a sermon fine, a sermon fine, while Jean was swinging on a vine. Oh, lovely Jean, oh, beautiful Jean, Prince Charlie's fond delight-o. She really was a sight-o. He couldn't bear a baby's cry, it nearly made the pirate die. I wonder what is in his chest, until I know I'll never rest, says beautiful Jean, says lovely Jean, a-swinging on her vine-o." The next morning, there was trouble with Jonah again. He had appeared to be thriving on the goat's milk and had fewer and fewer attacks of colic. He was really developing into a beautiful bouncing boy, and his outing on the desert island had given him a much better color and rounder cheeks than he had when he had been under the care of his fond mother. Mary was quite proud of him. But on the day after the party, he awoke screaming and screwing up his face, kicking his legs and clawing the air with his hands. What's the matter, begged Mary, tenderly hanging over him. "Baby talk," scoffed Jean. "If his name is Jonah, ours ought to be Job. We've got so many troubles. Jean Job. That would be rather nice for a change, wouldn't it? Or maybe it should be Job Jean." "It doesn't sound like colic," murmured Mary, running through all her little tricks for appeasing crying babies. But none of them did Jonah any good. "Do you suppose he could have caught anything from Mr. Peterkin yesterday?" "Mr. Peterkin looks healthy to me," remarked Jean. "Only the good die young." That remark did not serve to comfort Mary at all, for naturally she considered Jonah one of the good, and the idea that he might be going to die young filled her with even greater alarm. It was at this tense moment that they noticed the first crashing noise from the jungle. At first, it sounded like the reverberation of distant thunder, and then crash, crash. This was followed by more thunder and another crash. "What is it?" gasped Mary. For a few moments, Jonah was frightened out of his howls, and the four babies looked at Mary with round, questioning eyes. "Sounds like one of those dinosaur things we had in our geography, coming through the woods and a swing in its tail," offered Jean. "But the dinosaurs have been all dead for these thousands of years, Jean." "Well, I told you my idea. Now you tell me yours." Bang, 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 crash, crash. "I don't know," gasped Mary. "It's horrible, isn't it?" Jonah began to howl again, and one by one the other babies joined him. Chattering wildly, Prince Charlie hid his head under Jean's arm. But in a moment, a familiar face appeared. With a graceful swoop of red and green feathers, Halfred flew out of the jungle, and his horny black beak veritably seemed to smile at them. "Man the pumps, Mary, man the pumps," croaked Halfred cheerfully. "He's never called me Mary before. He has come to warn us, Jean." She began to scratch his head in the place he liked and begged him to tell them of the danger. But Halfred only winked his eye at her and remarked hoarsely, "Oh, you would you?" "Oh, Mary," cried Jean, "I know exactly what it is. It's Mr. Peterkin cutting a path for us through the jungle." "No," said Mary, sitting down flatly on a baked banana. But I thought we'd never see him again. Listen, commanded Jean. It's his axe that goes bang, 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 and then the tree comes down. Crash, crash. Halford came ahead to tell us. I knew that Mr. Peterkin had a heart of gold, cried Mary happily. It just goes to show you that you should never judge a heart by the kind of face it wears. But what about the babies, Mary? After all his work, it would be a pity for him to arrive here and find them all howling just the way they were when he clumped off and left them yesterday. Yes, it would be discouraging, admitted Mary. I'll hand out the hardtack, and you do a Highland fling for them. Hardtack and the Highland fling did wonders for the twins and Aunt Elizabeth. In a moment they were smiling again, and Mary had wiped their eyes and noses. But the nearer Mr. Peterkin came with his axe, the more dismally Jonah roared. I'll have to take him down to the beach, poor suffering angel, where the sound of the waves will drown out his cries, said Mary. You stay here, Jean, and welcome Mr. Peterkin when he comes. Jean was glad to be left at the teepee, for while she was just as fond of smiling babies as her sister, she sometimes shared Mr. Peterkin's sentiments about crying ones. Halford flew back and forth from the teepee to the scene of the crashing sounds, and Charlie, who had lost all his fear, swung through the branches hand, foot, and tail. It was well after noon before Mr. Peterkin chopped his way out of the jungle. Poor Mary had not yet returned, so Jean knew that Jonah must still be crying. There was a faint and most terrific crash, and then Mr. Peterkin put in his appearance. He was wet with sweat and looked more annoyed than usual. Well, there it is, he said, a path through the jungle. I didn't want it. It weren't my idea, but there it is for them that can use it. Troublesome, I calls it. Oh, thank you, Mr. Peterkin, cried Jean. Don't thank me, said the honest seaman crossly. It's for me little Lizzie. For who? Jean was puzzled. I mean said Mr. Peterkin, pointing to Anne Elizabeth. Anne Elizabeth, smiling engagingly, crawled to Mr. Peterkin's feet and stretched up her arms to be taken. Pity, she said happily. Pity, pity. Was they a-trying to starve me, little Lizzie, cooed Mr. Peterkin, taking the delighted baby into his arms. Was they a-trying to starve her, and here old Uncle Harvey, with all the milk she could hold, right around the other side of the Highland. Bless her little gizzard. Jean stared at them as hard as she could. Then she let out a howl of delight and started to run for the beach. Baby talk, Mary! Mr. Peterkin's talking baby talk! Come quick! Mary was walking slowly up the beach with Jonah in her arms when Jean called to her. Jonah was cooing happily, and Mary wore a rapturous smile on her tired face. But Jean saw the irritation that Mary's angelic smile had nothing whatsoever to do with the wonderful news of new path through the jungle, nor with the highly amusing fact that Mr. Peterkin was talking baby talk. She tried again. Mary, he's talking silly to Aunt Elizabeth, just the way you do. Baby talk, Mary. Well, of course, that was bound to happen sooner or later, dear, said Jean. I'm glad it's come so soon. But, oh, Jean, something most remarkable has happened to Jonah. Wonderful, Jean. Jean's mouth fell open again in surprise. If Mary could accept a path through the jungle and Mr. Peterkin's baby talk so calmly, whatever in the world had happened to Jonah to make her say remarkable and wonderful? Come here and look, Jeanie, she went on, and tell me if you ever saw a more beautiful sight. Filled with awe, Jeanie drew near and gazed into Jonah's round pink face. Open up, Dovey darling, begged Mary. Open up the itsy-bitsy mouthy for its ownest Mary. That's a lamb. Jonah gave them a wan smile, and Jean had a brief glimpse of something white showing against his red gum. It's just like a pearl, isn't it? Said Mary proudly. What? Said Jean, still mystified. Why, his first tooth. Don't you see it? That's why he's been crying so this morning. Poor cherub. It hurt when it was coming through, but now it's all right, and Mary's so proud of her quite big baby boy. Ugh, you and Mr. Peterkin and your baby talk, said Jean in disgust. I'm going to see the trail through the jungle. And away she went, whistling to Halfred and Charlie to join her.